Hello again. Here we are with chapter 3. Sorry about that. I was trying to get a good view of the slide so you don't miss anything. So this is a really interesting chapter. I will probably say that again before the semester is over. But this is a chapter that we talk about over and over again, particularly when it has to, well, with all of the topics, but perception in particular. So we're going to talk about 3 different topics: personality, perception, and attribution. So there are essentially a few different variables that are going to influence our behavior, individual behavior, your behavior, and the behavior of others. What is the person themselves, the environment, and then both of those things influence behavior. And the idea really is that depending upon the environment, people tend to behave differently. And within that, there are things that will influence us, whether or not the skills and ability, whether we think we can do the job or not do the job, what our personality is, which we'll talk about, our perception, which we'll talk about more in detail, attribution, attitudes, values, ethics, all of these things are things that we'll be covering. And then the environment, what's the organization like? Remember we talked about the formal and the informal organization earlier in the chapters, that every situation is different and every organization is different, and how we respond to that, it changes. Okay. So let's talk about this idea of interactional psychology. Essentially, it means that things are always changing. Our behavior is changing based on, we respond to the environment, and sometimes in some situations the environment responds to us. And we have the ability to change the environment, and the environment has the ability to change us as well. Okay, so there's a theory that trait theory is that you break down behavior patterns into observable traits in order to understand human behavior. So we look at these observable traits, and from that try to make sense of it. It's not uncommon in workplaces to people take personality tests, and a personality, everyone knows this from their own life experience, that one person, you can add or subtract a person from a group and the dynamics completely change. And a lot of that is based on how we react to each other and also what that person's personality is like. Okay, the other theory besides trait theory is integrative approach, that it's a process of people's psychological or thinking processes, emotional and thinking processes. That's integrative approach. And then, okay, so personality, relatively stable set of characteristics that influence someone's behavior and lend a consistency. So some people are extroverted, some people are introverted, some people are very orderly, some people are big planners. It depends. So personality, but it's relatively stable. People's personalities are relatively stable. All right, so this is something that you'll hear a lot about in the workplace, and is one of the tests that is administered. It's the Big 5 personality traits, and there are 5 of them, obviously. That's why they call it the Big 5. Extroversion, how gregarious they are, how agreeable someone is, or we know some people who are just always disagreeable and always antagonistic. People conscientious, how responsible someone is. Emotional stability, is someone always sort of on the even keel, or do they have great mood swings? Or are they stable and calm, or constantly anxiety ridden? And openness to new experience, this idea of curiosity, versus someone who's always just sort of focused on a few things, and never willing to branch out. And you know what? There's nothing good or bad about any of these traits. It's just a matter of how they fit the situation, and it's just the way we are. Everyone exists on a continuum for all of these. There's no one. People aren't always one way or the other. There's a continuum. Okay, so there's personality characteristics and organization that we will go through one by one. One is this idea of locus of control. And I believe we've talked about this already. Locus of control, belief about internal control versus external control, essentially saying people with an internal locus of control believe that they control the situation and that they can modify what's happening, and they have control over things that life throws at them. Whereas the external locus of control are people who believe things happen to them. Everything that happens to them is their fault. They can't take responsibility for it. The reason that they were late on the report is because their coworker was being too noisy at their desk, or the reason they were late for their work because they, the information they were given was bad, or whatever it may be. Okay, general self-efficacy, essentially being able, how comfortable someone feels performing a certain tasks in a variety of situations. Now, everybody has different skill sets. There's no doubt about that. And you might feel very comfortable organizing and planning a meeting, whereas someone else feels very comfortable working with numbers. And the idea of self-efficacy is that, okay, so maybe you're not really good at working at numbers, but you believe that if given the chance to work it out and try, you probably could do it. Self-esteem is how you held your self-worth, which comes from a variety of different places, usually starts at a young age. And then self-monitoring is this idea of how you respond to people around you. Do people react? Is this a person who constantly reacts to other people's behavior? Or are they able to recognize other people's behavior and respond to it appropriately? If someone else is upset, do they get upset? Or do they respond to that by trying to calm that person down and respond to them in a sort of more measured and placid way? Okay, there's also positive and negative affect. That is said affect, not affect. Positive and negative affect. It's sort of, if you ever read Winnie the Pooh, you talk about Eeyore sort of has a negative affect. Everything's bad, everything's awful, the sky is falling. They're constantly looking at the negative aspects of themselves and other people, and also the world in general and in situations and that kind of thing. Positive affect is someone who just has a good attitude about things, always looking on the bright side. Their glass is half full. Or their glass can be refilled. Proactive personality is this idea that people who take initiative and really believe that they can affect change, and they work on doing that. Okay, so I posted on Facebook the Kearnsey temperament sorter, which is really based off the Myers-Briggs type indicator. And there are 4 categories in there: that introversion, extroversion, sensing, intuiting, thinking and feeling, and judging and perceiving. The idea is that that we have this consistent set of traits and how we interact and respond with the world. I'll talk a little bit more about it in detail here. I do encourage you to take that test. I put the sheet in there. If you have any questions about how to score it, let me know. But it's interesting. And I myself have taken it probably 3 or 4 times in my life, and invariably I always come out the same. I am an ENFP, sort of borderline between feeling and thinking, but it's pretty consistent. So the first one, extroversion and introversion, is where you get your energy from. Do you get your energy from being alone, or you get your energy from being with other people? It doesn't necessarily mean, like in the Big Five, I talk about its gregariousness, whereas with the Myers-Briggs, it's more about how you get your energy. So you could be a very outgoing person and very friendly and love to be around people, but it's when you're by yourself that you really get energized. It's sensing and intuiting. That's how you gather information. Do you gather it through the 5 senses, or do you follow it more from a gut perspective? And then thinking and feeling, how you make decisions. Again, is it based on hard facts and evidence, or is it based on a larger, like, lifelong life philosophy on things? And then judging and perceiving is how you view the world. So a judger likes to have things very planned out, and they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing on April 4th at 4 o'clock, and they don't like to change it. Whereas people who are perceiving, they believe that plans are what get in the way of opportunity. So what does this have to do with the workplace? If you work, it's a way to manage yourself and others in the workplace, as we have talked about before. So if you have a boss who only likes to gather information through the 5 senses, you're going to give them hardcore information. If you have a boss that makes decisions based on a larger sense of larger plan or a larger philosophy, then you might not want to just look at the things in terms of necessarily rationally, but might want to appeal to the emotional side. Same thing with judging and perceiving. If you have a boss who likes to have everything planned, then you want to respond by being with the planned schedule. If you have a boss who likes to sort of see how things go, then you have to be open to that. And same thing, if you have people who work for you who have one of these other traits, you kind of want to be able to respond to them so that you get the most out of them. And the idea of extroversion and introversion as well. Some people who are highly extroverted are probably really good in sales jobs and probably really good with, dealing with customers and on the phones and all that kind of thing. Whereas an introverted person might be better working on reports and doing things that are more single focused. Doesn't mean that they don't have good interpersonal skills. It just means they like to be alone. So you want to think about those things. Okay, so how do you use the Myers-Briggs? It's again the idea of understanding different viewpoints of other people, and you can use it with team building, helping to better understand your coworkers, and helps you to appreciate and maximize diversity. Okay, so that's it on personality. We're going to move into perception, social perception, exceedingly important. There are essentially, in a situation, there's the perceiver characteristics, the target characteristics of the two people, how familiar people are with what the relationship is between the perceiver and the target, what that person's mood is, their self-concept, how they think, cognitive structures, this idea about how they think. And then the target characteristics, physical appearance does make a difference. It could also lead to like verbal and nonverbal cues, what the intention is. And then also what's going on in the situation. We go back to this interactional psychology idea that every situation is different. And there are barriers, very important barriers to social perception. We talk about it as a perceptual screen. So think of it as we all have it. Everybody has a perceptual screen. So think of it sort of like this scrim or this mesh or shade in front of you. It's the way through which we see the world. So we're going to go through one by one and talk about that. Okay, selective perception basically is only seeing things that support your opinion. So let's say you really want to see your organization open up a new plant. But even though there might be a lot of things wrong with it, you only see the positive side to it. So things that only support your individual viewpoint. And then other viewpoints are just completely discounted. Stereotype is applying generalizations about a group of people. Blondes aren't smart. I have blonde hair. I always feel safe saying that. Women aren't good drivers. I'm a woman. I can say that too. I don't believe either one of those at all. But that's a stereotype. Blondes are dumb. Women are bad drivers. People who go to Ivy League schools are super hard workers. That's a stereotype. It can be to the good and the bad. First impression error is essentially this idea that you come up with your first impression of someone is wrong. We're going to talk a little bit about how other people manage that, but stereotype, the idea of first impression error is that you may have been, once you have that really great first impression, it's hard for you to back away from that. Like you think, oh, when they came in for the interview, they were so organized and outgoing and they seemed to really have it all together. When in fact, maybe that first impression is wrong. Maybe they were just really good at manipulating you, or maybe it was just some of the things they said, or maybe it was the mood you were in. So that's another barrier to social perception. And then there's two more, projection and self-fulfilling prophecy. Projection is the idea is overestimating the idea that other people feel the same way you do. So, hey, I like to go to all the company picnics, so doesn't everybody else like to go to all the company picnics? I love having time to talk with people in the morning before the work starts. Doesn't everybody else like to have time in the morning to talk to everybody? I really believe that this company, we need to dig in and cut back and to make the company better. Doesn't everybody else believe that way? And then self-fulfilling prophecy is also known as the Pygmalion effect. They talk about that in the book. Pygmalion is the idea that eventually Pygmalion was a play that was written by George Bernard Shaw, which eventually became My Fair Lady, which you may be familiar with. You may or may not be familiar with. But it's this idea that you can people behave the way you expect them to behave. So if you expect someone to really excel and you treat them like they're going to excel, then they're going to excel. If you believe that someone's going to fail and you treat them like that, and you send cues in different ways that they're going to fail, then chances are they're probably going to fail. Okay, impression management is this idea that sort of gets involved with the whole idea of the self-fulfilling prophecy to a certain extent. I'm sorry, not, the first impression error. Impression management is the idea that you control the information that someone else has about you, and you try to use it. It's basically name dropping. You talk about all your successes. You talk about all the great things you've done. You talk about how smart you are. You talk about the kind of car you drive. You talk about how great your friends are. You talk about how great your life is and how so you control what other people think about you, which can be kind of dangerous in a way. You have to be careful about people. I think everyone knows someone who's a name dropper or someone who spends a lot of time trying to impress other people. Talk about how much money they have, whatever. So that's impression management. It's when someone is managing your impression of them. Okay, now the third one, attribution and attribution biases. So essentially, everyone wants to talk about how other behavior is caused. So internal attributions are attributing events to something within someone's control, and external attributions is attributing events to someone's outside the individual's control. So that person has got their promotion because they worked really hard, or the only reason they got that promotion is because the only reason they didn't get that promotion is because the boss's son-in-law got it. Whatever. So it's internal and external attributions. And what people control, what other people control. It's a way to rationalize. Okay, and then there's essentially two different attribution biases. Also, fundamental attribution error. Is you make attributions to internal causes when focusing on someone else's behavior. So they didn't try hard enough, or they work really hard. Again, that could be to the good and the bad. And then self-serving bias, is the idea that you contribute your own success to internal causes and your failure to external causes. So everything that good happens is because of you, and everything bad that happens to you is because of someone else's fault, or because of some environmental condition, or some circumstances. So it's the idea of attribution bias. It's trying to explain things sometimes to the detriment of others. Okay, so that's chapter 3, personality, perception, and attribution. And next up is chapter 4, and we'll see that in a minute. Okay.